All right, so this is a suggestion via Discord. The name of the video is How Presidential Elections Influence the Federal Reserve. Let's go and check it out. Let's see where this takes us, guys.
The Federal Reserve is in the spotlight as 2024's election approaches.
The Fed will act during presidential election seasons. The question now is, will the Fed act if the case is marginal?
If you spoke to any Federal Reserve chair, they would tell you that they make their decisions based on what's right for the economy, not on the election cycle.
Read all the transcripts and see if anybody mentions in any way the pending election. It just isn't part of our thinking. It's not what we're hired to do.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jerome Powell needs to go, guys. All right. And I'm going to say this exclusively because he knows that he can, in fact, lower the interest rate. By lowering the interest rate will basically also make it so people start purchasing 10-year Treasury bonds. He is the reason why everything's expensive in the United States of America. Blame him.
Anyway, the pending election, it just isn't part of our thinking. It's not what we're hired to do.
Inflation is the chief concern of U.S. adults, according to a May 2024 survey. But stabilizing prices is traditionally the Fed's job, not the president's.
My plan is to address inflation. It starts with a simple proposition: respect the Fed.
A long line of experts say that presidents
Bro, if there were no subtitles, I would have not understood a single thing he said.
should avoid meddling in the central bank's affairs.
And they are one of the most powerful institutions probably in the world.
Effectively, an executive's ability to control the power of the purse could one day lead us down to a president who would be more like a king.
Former President Donald Trump is reportedly considering how to exert more influence over the Fed.
Irrespective of Donald Trump's plans about what to do with the Fed, there is a concern that any future president might be tempted to influence the Fed because of the US's fiscal position.
So how does the Fed factor into the 2024 election?
Okay. Yeah, guys, that doesn't sound like a great idea, but I think the only way, I'm telling you, the only way we can lower interest rates on money, I'm not talking about making it free again, okay? Not no 0 to 3%. I'm not talking about this. 5, give us 4.5, right? I think that will help a lot of us out. It will.
A committee at the Federal Reserve makes decisions that can influence how voters feel about the economy. For that reason, they're supposed to be independent and far away from politics.
And most studies show that more independence from the Federal Reserve leads to better monetary policy.
Central bankers at the Fed are not elected. They can't be easily fired by the executive branch, and they can't be easily influenced by the president.
Members of the Board of Governors have 14-year terms, and this is to protect independent judgment.
That said,
appointments at the Fed are certainly getting very politicized in recent years.
7 governors on the Federal Reserve Interest Rate Committee are nominated by the president and confirmed by Congress.
And then 5 Reserve Bank presidents. Those Reserve Bank presidents, it's going to be the New York Fed president and 4 other Reserve Bank presidents who kind of rotate through.
In 2024, 4 of the sitting members were nominated by President Biden, 2 were nominated by President Trump, and the chair, Jerome Powell, was approved by leaders from both parties.
The Fed chair is not really a political appointee. Pretty typical that even if you have presidents from different parties, they'll still reappoint the same person as the Fed chair.
If this became a tool of politicians, then of course what they're going to do is they will want to lower interest rates now, because low interest rates are like dessert before dinner.
You see what I'm saying here, guys? Please lower the interest rates. Lower the interest rates right now.
They'd always taste pretty good, but then you have to deal with actually getting some nutrition.
Right.
From 2022 to 2023, the Federal Reserve took its interest rate from near 0 to above 5%.
And guys, this is what I'm talking about, free money, right? During this time, right, during the 19, money was basically free, bro. And even before then, it was still kind of free compared to what it is now. And honestly, it's higher than this. It's like 7, bro. Okay, so just keep this in mind here. Yeah, I would like for the interest rates to be a lot lower. I think people will be able to do a lot more, guys. I'm telling you, we will be able to keep a little bit more of our money. But this is wrecking us right now, bro. So when it comes to Jerome Powell not bringing it back down to at least, again, I'll be fine at 4.5. All right, we just need to take it from 7.
The committee believes this level is working to reduce inflation.
You see it in the labor market, you see it in inflation-sensitive
causing
spending,
these
where
issues.
demand has clearly come down a lot over the past few years.
Sometimes, like in the post-pandemic era, central bankers use higher interest rates to restrict economic growth and prevent prices from climbing so quickly.
We've been going through a period of history where the Fed has been pretty rapidly rising rates, and we hadn't seen anything like that in a number of decades. These higher interest rates that we've been experiencing for the past 2 years or so
Being
make
punished
the cost of money and credit more expensive.
But sometimes, politicians may pressure the central bank to cut its interest rates.
Yeah, but he won't.
Politicians, they know this might have an inflationary impact, but if they are a few months away from the election, then they think, okay, let's stimulate activity.
And lower interest rates.
Some past presidents have pressured the Fed to lower interest rates, even if that would be a dangerous decision. The most notable example came under President Nixon.
We must stop the rise in the cost of living.
So the relationship between President Richard Nixon and Fed Chair Arthur Burns is probably the best known historical example of presidential pressure on a Fed chair.
Nixon appointed Burns in 1969 because he expected that Burns was going to be a Republican Party loyalist.
Take, for example, this conversation from December 1971, 11 months before the next election.
Chair Burns says to Nixon,
Look, I wanted you to know we reduced the discount rate today.
to which President Nixon replies,
Oh, yeah, good. You can lead them, you always have now, so just kick them in the rump a little.
Nixon also put artificial controls on wages and prices to guide the consumer economy. He went on to win 1972's election, commanding 60.7% of the popular vote.
Okay, I get it. If we do this, then we're making a king. Basically, for the most part, Nixon was acting like he was a king.
Of course, after the price controls
Do
were
we want
lifted,
that?
all of that
No,
monetary
the United States of America is basically created not to allow dynasties.
easing
Or
led to this
kingdoms.
big burst of inflation.
and it's sort of gone down in history as a nightmare for central bank independence.
Nixon famously resigned from the presidency amid the escalating Watergate crisis in 1974.
Yeah, super corrupt.
At the same
by sound
time,
of it.
inflation was running rampant, rising 10% from the year before. Presidents beyond Nixon may have pressured the Fed for political gain.
The variation in these meetings is enormous. For example, former President Clinton met only 6 times with people from the Federal Reserve. For Nixon, that count was 160.
The consequences were almost always negative.
I find little evidence that the pressure affects real activity. So while it increases prices, it actually does not stimulate the economy.
But frequently, conditions within the economy may call for Fed action, even in an election year.
So we looked at 34 years of data going back to 1989. The Fed will react to shocks that hit the system in both the great financial crisis and the pandemic. Both had a banking and financial element to them. The case for cutting was very obvious and not very controversial.
As recently as March, the Federal Reserve signaled that it would cut interest rates 3 times in 2024.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure they lied about that.
But as the summer approached, the central bank hedged on its forecast of lower interest rates because annual inflation hadn't yet slowed to their target rate of about 2%.
Yeah, here's the problem here, guys. We're not going to get back down to 2% anytime soon because of all of this stuff here. Right? So here's the issue here. Doom spending. People who were saving up all this money to purchase a house, let's say, right? They got $20,000, $30,000 in the bank for the first time ever in their life. And what happens? They go out to buy a house. They realize that the prices of houses have shot up, right? Then they realize that what they thought they could actually afford for a house, they can no longer afford because now the interest rate has made it so that, that $400,000 house now requires you to make $116,000 a year. When before, that $400,000 house was a $200,000 house or $250,000 house, right? And you could afford that exact house, right? Making your salary of $83,000, let's say. So this is really the problem here. Then that family that saved up that $20,000, $30,000 is like, well, I guess I can't afford a house, so let's go on a vacation, right? And that's the reality. So as things are getting more expensive up this chart here, right? People are like, listen, I'm still going to go ahead and live my life. I don't care anymore. And so now you have a lot of people doom spending. and just trying to maintain life. Things are getting more expensive. They still want to go eat that McDonald's. When you used to spend $20 at McDonald's, now it's $40. It feels like 40 or 30 something for the same thing that you were getting before, right? And everything is more expensive. You're still trying to maintain your lifestyle, but now you're just putting everything on credit. And Jerome Powell will not lower interest rates until people stop spending. So until people stop doom spending. Like, we get it, it's bad. He wants us to go without, basically. Whatever you were used to, if you've seen that it was more expensive, you no longer buy it. Logic would dictate that. But we live in a country with credit and access to credit and credit cards and things like that. So if you noticed how our credit usage has shot up at around, literally, at this exact point in history, our credit history has shot up. Credit usage has shot up. We can't afford it. We can't afford to live this life, but people are still trying to maintain it, trying to keep the status quo. And Jerome Powell is like, well, if it was affecting them, they wouldn't do it. Bro, we're American, right? We live in excess, unfortunately. And that's the overall thing that's going on, bro. Right? The only way for him to lower interest rates so we can get back to normal pricing is for all of us to just go without. We have to decide for like at least a month, 2-3 months, that we're no longer going to buy certain things, bro. Right? Jerome Powell is like, oh, credit cards for some people are like 28% interest. Oh, it's fine, but they're still using it. Bro, you're at 28% interest. Don't do that. They're giving you a brand new car for what, 13% at times for some people? Why would you sign that paper? You're fine with it then, right? He doesn't care if you need it, just desperately need it. He doesn't care at all. Jerome Powell. Let's go ahead and do this, guys.
I think keeping the policy rate where it is, it's restrictive. That'll continue to sort of slowly grind down the economy, but not throw it off a cliff.
The current state of the economy could play a big role in the election.
Wages keep going up, inflation keeps coming down. Inflation has dropped from 9% to 3%, the lowest in the world, and tending lower.
Inflation has been falling.
Interest rate hasn't dropped.
It's just always really hard to tell because interest rates kind of work with a lag. We don't know exactly how long it takes for their effects to spread.
I think Jerome Powell basically gets the information 3 years later. That's basically what I'm speculating here. I thought he's a boogeyman.
Biden's economic administration, led by former Fed officials, has been criticized for heavy domestic spending, which may be inflationary.
Bidenomics, if I was a professor, I'd give them an F. The Fed needs to stop helping them out because it's causing inflation.
The inflation was primarily caused by the pandemic and the policy response. But the policy response under both parties. Most of the fiscal stimulus occurred when President Trump was president. And yes, President Biden continued that. Inflation works with a lag.
Mm-hmm. And they got used to that money, bro. All that brand new printed billions of dollars.
So this was built up all the way through the pandemic. Reality is that short-term interest rates are abnormally high right now to try to combat inflation. Inflation's been coming down, it'll come down some more, so it makes sense to normalize.
President Biden has promised to avoid interfering in the tasks of civil servants, which include the staff at the Fed's Board of Governors. His opponent, former President Donald Trump, reportedly has plans to make interest rate decisions himself.
The Wall Street Journal now reporting that Donald Trump's allies are quietly drafting proposals that would attempt to erode the Federal Reserve's independence.
You would have, an arrangement with the Fed that is not the norm that we've had in the last 40 years.
Former President Trump, when he was in office, openly criticized the Fed for keeping policy too tight.
That, according to one study, did have an effect both on markets' perceptions of what the Fed would do and actually on the Fed. So the study suggests that the Fed actually lowered rates lower than they otherwise would have been because of the pressure from the president. It was something the Federal Reserve buckled at. They were concerned about that.
The campaigns for both President Biden and former President Donald Trump did not respond to CNBC's request for a comment. But in May 2024, the White House did put out a statement on the importance of central bank independence. The use of low interest rates, along with strong spending, has devastated other societies throughout history.
The framers and ratifiers were very intentional to set up a system in which Congress would be the only one, not the president, to exercise the power of the purse, because of course they had this long and familiar history of European monarchs abusing the public fisc.
And that's what we do not want. So like, even though I'm sitting here talking about how, yeah, we need to force them to lower the interest rate, I don't know. That may be a great idea, but I do want the interest rate lowered. Right, I do want the 10-year treasuries to kind of start getting purchased again. I need those to be lower also. I need everything to basically work like how it was working in 2017 or 18. We need to go back to that.
In the best case scenario, in the best state of the world, the Fed doesn't do anything differently just because it's an election year, especially in regard to its monetary policy function.
Yeah, guys, all right. I do think that it's going to play a gigantic part coming up because there are two things that are going to be playing a huge part in this upcoming election. It's going to be the economy. It's going to be inflation. It's going to be the fact that the interest rates are high, and then it's going to be immigration. Well, not just like immigration, but like the southern border not having basically a border. That's basically what's the two things that are going to be the main talking points this year are going to be those two things, guaranteed. But all right, listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly. Guys, before we go, are you guys subscribed to the other channels? Logical Movie Reviews with Mr. L. Boyd along with Mr. L. Boyd Music. Both are found in the description. Check it out.